Stephen Fearing, what a pleasure to hear you, in my case, for the first time in Denmark, here in Vordingborg. Tell me, how was it to come to the south of Sjælland, the island, and play for an audience here?
It was remarkable. I mean, the only time I've ever played in this country was, as I was saying, with Blackie and the Rodeo Kings at Roskilde, which is probably a pretty strange representation of this country. And that was just, a full-on sweaty rock show with a lot of people stuffed into a tent. So this is very different. But aside from the audience, for me, the whole thing was the chance to play with these guys, with the Sentimentals, because up until 2 days ago, our entire relationship was through email and Skype. And so I hadn't met him. So I was literally flying over on a long flight from Vancouver thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. So, that it's hard to separate that from the whole experience, but a beautiful venue, like this business, you have to play a lot of shows and do a lot of things that are undignified, and that's just the name of the game. And if you can't handle it, don't be in this business. But this was not one of those.
Tell me, how did you get together with MC Hansen, who's sitting here next to you, and the Sentimentals? Usually he finds people back over in the States or where he's roaming around, but I understand this is the other way around this time.
Yeah, I found him through Jonathan Bird, who he's worked with and written with many times. And Jonathan is an acquaintance of mine. We met many years ago at a little festival in Oregon. And I wrote to him a year ago and said, I see you're touring through Scandinavia. Do you have any contacts? It's just kind of one of those things that you throw out. And I was literally sitting in my front room thinking, God, I want to go back there and play there again. And I don't know anybody. And it's sometimes you knock on doors and nothing happens, and you knock and knock. And this time I sent out one email, and he literally got back to me within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and said, yeah, talk to this guy, MC Hansen. So I sent him an email, and he got back to me within 24 hours. And it was just it was so easy. And I've actually kept saying that to these guys, that you keep waiting for, when is the kind of the point where you go, here's where the problem is. The sound system's terrible, or somebody's a drunk, or something where there's an obstacle that you have to get over, and there hasn't been any. And I keep wondering, this is so strange, because I'm not a pessimist at all, and I do believe that the glass is half full. And I really think that if you pursue your career and you walk into the world with that kind of philosophy, then you attract that to you. But still, shit happens.
And beware, this was only the first job with the Sentimentals. Yeah. But Mads, is that true? Is it the first time that someone contacted you to go on tour with you in Denmark?
No, that happens a lot, but we rarely say yes to anyone.
Oh, okay.
Actually, just because it's great if they're nice, but we want them to be both nice and really good. So, and I knew Stephen already. I had actually been introduced to Stephen's music by my agent in England, whom he actually booked Stephen to play a couple of shows in a few weeks from now. So the world just keeps getting smaller for us. So no, we don't always say yes. We rarely say yes, but when somebody's that good, we have to say yes.
So specify, what was it that made you say yes to Stephen Fearing?
Well, I knew his music, so that helped. But actually, Jonathan emailed me and said, this guy Stephen Fearing just contacted me asking if he could talk to you guys. And I just want to say one thing, just go ahead and do it, is what he said. So you should do this. Yeah. So yeah, he gave a recommendation too.
I gotta send him a lot of licorice. Yeah, apparently he likes licorice, so I'll be sending him some.
So you were here with Blackie and the
Rodeo Kings.
And the Rodeo Kings. So when you're doing solo, is that like a side thing to Blackie?
No, in some ways, Blackie is the side thing, because, I started doing this and I'll be doing this no matter what. But the Rodeo Kings have been going for 23 years now. And I think we all feel the same way, which is when we decide to tour as that, then that becomes our main focus. But you can't just have one gig anymore. You've got to have a lot of irons in the fire. So for me, that's what I hope can become is something else, another way to skin the cat, if that's not the right. You know what I mean? Just another way to do it.
Keep working hard. Yeah. You might end up on the stage in the Roskilde Festival with the Sentimentals. About where you come from, it's Vancouver, Canada, the far west, south corner. What kind of a place is that?
Well, Vancouver is the main city it's the biggest city in British Columbia, which is the farthest west province. And I live a little farther west, so Vancouver Island, which is where I live, and Victoria is the main city in Vancouver Island. It's a really interesting climate. It's called the gardening city because it's very lush. The climate is beautiful. It never gets that cold. It never gets that hot. It's just a lovely place. It's a very safe place, although we do occasionally have wild animals roaming down from the hills.
Bears?
Not bears, cougars. So big cats, big cats. There are bears farther up island, but it's a pretty placid place. Back when I was younger and I lived in Vancouver, I would never have lived in Victoria. Victoria was old fuddy-duddies. The joke is Victoria's newlywed, nearly dead flower bed. But now it's also, craft-baked bread and breweries and stone-fired pizza and all the hipster wonderful things. So it's just a lovely place. It's not a great music scene, but I don't need a music scene where I live. I tend to go to work across Canada and in Europe, and where I live is a place where I want to go for a walk with my wife and raise my kid. Yeah.
But if my geographical education was not that bad, Seattle, it's just across the border from, you're close to the American border, and you have Seattle where Jimi Hendrix came from, Nirvana. Yeah. And I read about Jimi Hendrix that in the beginning he had gigs going to Vancouver, starting to play there. So are they like twin cities in each their country, Vancouver and Seattle?
Vancouver would like to think so, but nah. Vancouver is a really strange place. It's a very beautiful place, but the main industry in Vancouver is real estate. And so it seems like every generation, there's this huge turnover, and it's all based on money. And so now, houses in Vancouver, tiny houses, like bungalows with a tiny postage-sized backyard, are selling for $2 million. And people buy them, knock the house down, and then build a $3 million house on it. So those people they're not really coming there to be part of a community. So there isn't the same kind of community. There used to be. And in the 60s and 70s, Vancouver was sort of the California of Canada, but not anymore. It's changed. Yeah, it's changed a lot. Live music there are still some incredible musicians there, like superb, but a lot of people are wondering what the future is, because the live venues, since rent is so high and real estate is so expensive, it's really hard to run a club. It's difficult to keep the scene going, because you got to have a scene if you want to have musicians. Yeah.
You grew up, I read, in Dublin, and was it on your own homepage? There's a hint that you went to school in Dublin with some of those from U2. Which of them? Who of them?
All of them. They were. What were they then? They were Feedback. That was the name of their band. They went from Feedback, then they became The Hype, and then they became U2. So they would play our school dances. I remember seeing The Edge come on stage with a plywood guitar that he had made with his brother in their garage, so that he could smash it on stage, because they couldn't afford to smash a real guitar. So he made this plywood guitar and smashed it. But they were local guys. I remember the famous poster, which U2 fans will recall. There's a famous poster that was put up by Larry, the drummer, wanting to start a band. I remember seeing that poster in my high school. Now, if I had stolen that poster, you know how much that poster is worth now? Like, can you imagine? Yeah, I remember seeing that. But yeah, there were a lot of bands. My school at the time was, it was a very forward-thinking school. In Ireland, schools were Catholic or Protestant. Sports were mandatory, and they were kind of pretty rigid places. And my school was a lot more liberal. You didn't have to play rugby and those kinds of things. So there was a proliferation of bands. And we had a history teacher by the name of Donald Moxham, and he was very influential with helping me. He did one thing for me that was huge, which is he took me seriously as a musician. He recorded me in the music room with a reel-to-reel, gave me a demo tape, dubbed it onto cassette. And then he sent one song out to a local pirate radio station, and they played my song. So I was 17 years old, and I heard myself on the radio. And that, when an adult takes you seriously like that, I get choked up even thinking about it. But he helped them out a lot too. He made sure that they had time to use the music room to rehearse. And so it was a good school for that. And they came out of that. And I mean, at the time, like, Ireland is such an amazing country. It always punches way above its weight. But it was almost like a second world country then, And the idea that an Irish band would have success in England, let alone the world, was kind of a big dream. And I remember leaving Ireland after I finished my leaving certificate, and I ended up in Minneapolis for the better part of 2 years. And one day I walked into this record store called Or Folk Joke Opus, and it was the vinyl store where all the hipsters hung out. And there was U2 Boy. And I was so excited that they'd actually made it out, because we would go and see them play in local church halls. They were just playing locally. They were trying to make it go, and they got a deal with Ireland, and they made it. They made it to America, and we went and saw them. My friend Stuart and I went to see them at Fifth Avenue, which was Prince's club. And we tried to get backstage. We said to the bouncer, we went to school with them. And he said, yeah, so did all those people. Get in the line. We never saw them.
Okay. Would you say that if you grew up like in Vancouver and not in Dublin, you might not have become a singer, musician?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I didn't play, and everybody was playing in punk bands or mod bands. I didn't do that, but there was a sense that it was possible to be an artist, because Ireland is full of artists. They're either storytellers or writers. There's so many different versions of artist that it's not uncommon to sit with somebody that is an artist when you're young. Whereas in North America, you have to hang around the weirdos to hang around artists. It's not that common, and it's still considered, I mean, even where I live in Victoria, which is full of retired people and people that are making a living doing pottery and things like that, to be a working artist is still a little bit of an odd thing. So no, it wouldn't have happened in Vancouver.
So let's keep on the name dropping now. We got past U2, and I see a record downstairs that you're selling. It's a Blackie record. And I see Emmylou Harris, I see Lucinda Williams, I see Cassandra Wilson on it. How did that come about?
That was, it was literally an idea that came up in one of those late night van rides. And Colin Linden said, wouldn't it be great if we made a record with some women? Because the band in itself is a collaboration. And it's really important to understand that the three principals, Colin Linden, Tom Wilson, and myself, we all have separate careers, but we came together around the music of Willie P. Bennett, who we love, and is like a patron saint for us. And he's long dead now, but if he was sitting here, he would reach over and smack me on the back of the head. He was a great character, Willie. But at some point, we realized that as a band, if we could collaborate with other artists, it would be very exciting. And the idea of collaborating with women, because we were all primarily raised by women, absent fathers, dead fathers, divorced fathers. I think a lot of men of my generation, if they sort of really think about it, realize that they were actually raised by women. And so we all have a real soft spot for the women in our lives, and the idea of making an album with these singers where we meet them as equals, as grown-ups. That was sort of the idea of the album. And of course, Colin Linden has a pretty formidable address book, because he played in Emmylou's band. He's produced Lucinda. He's worked with a lot of these people in Nashville. So he started making calls, and it was remarkable how many people came through and said, yeah. It was astounding. There was only a few cold calls where we didn't know. Like Patti Scialfa was one of them, Springsteen's missus. You know, yeah, we didn't know. None of us knew her. And we phoned Springsteen's office. Colin did, and they took us seriously. They didn't laugh hysterically. They took us seriously. And then when you look at it and you go, oh, well, Emmylou Harris is singing on it, and Roseanne Cash is singing on it. These guys must be legit. So she came back and she said, yeah, I'll sing on your record. So it was a pretty good example of, if you actually just ask, you never know what'll happen. Sometimes you think, oh, no, I can't do that. You know, they'll never go for that. But one thing leads to another. It's amazing.
I was starting listening to it this afternoon on Spotify. I came 3 songs in, then there was a phone call, and then I had to get away to down here.
Yeah.
But I see, that's what I want to ask you. Cassandra Wilson.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned her.
I mean, this is more like country singer-songwriting, Americana. Okay, now we're talking Cassandra Wilson, but, well, she might be considered a jazz singer.
Yeah.
What is she doing on your record?
Well, you know, we made a wish list. We all sort of threw in names of singers that we really love. And Colin had worked with her on, I'm trying to remember the album. He played on the tune Red River Valley. So it was many years ago now. But I've loved her music. I'm a jazz fan. But really, just doesn't really matter what it is. Her voice is just superb. And so her name came up, and I said, oh my God, if we could get her to sing this song. And the other weird thing about the record is this guy is writing songs. We don't know, is the woman going to want to sing the whole song, in which case it's written from the perspective of a man, or is she going to want to sing a harmony or trade back and forth? So I had written that song, and it's very much from the perspective of a young man. And suddenly Cassandra Wilson is going to sing on it. So Colin and I got together, and I changed half of the I changed every second verse so that it was from my perspective, the young man's perspective, and from the older woman's perspective. And it's a bit of a Mrs. Robinson kind of song. Young man, older woman, attraction, and she got it. So she was able to sing it with the right perspective in her voice, and it was fascinating for me to rewrite a song so that a woman could sing it, looking at the male voice instead of always singing it from a male perspective.
Nothing wrong with older women. My wife, she's 1 year older than me. And back to your record, it was called Kings and Queens. Did you make it Kings and Kings?
Yes.
Yeah. So was that with male?
Yeah, it was all.
Didn't get that far.
It was all with guys.
Yeah.
Same thing. You know, we just threw names into the hat. I had the unbelievable pleasure of writing a song with my friend Andy White. And I said, Colin, if you can get Nick Lowe to sing this, I would lose.
Nick Lowe?
Nick Lowe.
Really?
And so we asked him, and he said, yeah, let me hear it. And so he listened to it, and then he wrote back to Colin, and he said, do you mind if I change some of the lyrics? So Colin wrote to me, you know, I'm sure with a certain amount of trepidation. I said, oh my God, no. He can do whatever he wants. So was it last summer or the summer before, we played Shrewsbury Festival, and Nick Lowe was there. And I got to say to him, why did you change the lyrics the way you did? Not like, why did you change my lyrics? But what were you thinking of? And I think he was a little freaked out that maybe I was going to get mad at him or something, or maybe he couldn't even remember what I was talking about. That's probably more like it. But when I reminded him of it, he said, well, you know, I'm about 8 years older than you, and some of your lyrics didn't make sense to come out of my voice. And they were just little changes, but really profound changes. So from a songwriter's perspective, it was like a little lesson in writing, because he made them better. He tightened them up. Like, it just got the wrench in and tightened them up. it was really great.
This Nick Lowe, he was good when he was young, but he seems like he's getting better the older he gets.
Yeah. I read an interview with him where he was talking about what he's doing now, and he said that he reached a point where he was looking at his peers, and he said they were either going the Mick Jagger route where they were pretending that nothing was happening, or they were going the Rod Stewart route where they were going, oh my God, I'm getting older, I better record Cole Porter songs. And he thought, neither of those options is going to work for me. So he went after his heroes from older country music. And he carries it off so well. To me, I want to do this until I'm too old to tour at all. And so you think, well, there's not a lot of precedence for getting old in the music business. There's Johnny Cash, and the video "Hurt" is one of the most profound performances I've ever seen. There's the Stones, which God bless them. I look at Keith Richards and I'm kind of in awe. Him more than Jagger, whatever. But Keith Richards has got it figured out. He's an old man with arthritic hands, and he's still swaggering, and it's believable. As long as it's believable, I'm in.
But I guess you all would have it like Mick Jagger when he was young. He said, "I can't imagine myself as a rock and roll star after 30."
Yeah, well, that was the old hippie thing.
Yeah.
There was a great poster was doing the rounds, and it was a classic hippie, and it said, "Never trust anyone over 30." It was crossed out. 35 crossed out. 40 crossed out. Yeah. I mean, that's what's happening. So how do you get old in this business? Okay, there's the Sinatra, but that's not what we're doing. So when you look at somebody like Nick Lowe, it's very inspiring. You can still be dignified, you can still rock, you can still have some edge. It doesn't have to turn into the American songbook.
Like Rod Stewart.
Bless
his heart. There's nothing wrong with Rod
Anybody
Stewart.
who's still doing it, fine by me. I get no criticisms from here. Yeah.
So Mads, he's sitting quietly,
I know,
admiringly looking. So I have a last question for Mads, you Mads. Me, I went to Møn the other day to sing Kvinde Min on a video. While you were playing, people were marching from Christianshavn to Farvergade, to the old place where Gasoline used to play, because Kim Larsen died. What did you do to honor Kim Larsen after he died last Sunday?
What did I do? Last Sunday. I was at home with my family. I watched a documentary on him. I didn't do anything to honor him. Maybe I will. I haven't done anything so far.
You talked about him to me. The first thing you said to me when I got off the plane was he explained about this gentleman that was so important. I knew nothing about him.
Yeah, well, Jacob and I played a house concert on Saturday, and there's a line in the song that paraphrases Kim Larsen. There's a guy who had a hard time who wrote Kvinde Min, kind of wrote that song again. The character in my song did. But I feel like I've honored him enough. I listened to him every day for 15 years when I was a boy, because my father played him all the time. So I feel like I don't owe him anything anymore. I think I gave him all the attention that I could.
But me, I think it's wonderful to see how people march in the streets, singing his songs. It's not arranged from above. It's just people.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Spontaneously.
Yeah,
starting singing his songs.
He is a very important person in Denmark, of course. Yeah, it's like he's not real. He's an alien. He's not human.
Yeah.
He was just something else. Yeah. And he was, the coolest thing about him is that he's a genre of music. People will say it sounds like Kim Larsen. It's almost his own genre. Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Let me tell you, Kim Larsen and his band in the 70s, Gasoline, they tried to make it in the USA.
Was that his band? Gasoline?
Gasoline.
Okay.
Yeah. And they translated some of their songs. He could talk English, but with an accent. Oh, yeah. And I just saw this, I think the same documentary as Mads saw. that they went to LA to play their first gig. There were 10 minutes before they started, there were no one in the hall. When they started, there were 5, and they started singing Gasoline songs in English. And guess what happened? What do you think happened?
I have no idea. There was 5 people there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did more people show up, or did those 5 people leave?
No, one of the 5 yelled at them, "Prøv på dansk!"
Oh my.
Try singing in Danish. It was Danish sailors. And they never made it in the US.
Yeah.
They went back having had lost a lot of money.
But they made it here.
Oh my.
Sure, it's like Beatles in Denmark.
Oh yeah.
For a long period of time, or did they have the big...
70s.
But still, now, I mean, obviously it meant more than just that, because people are mourning his death now.
Yeah. 7 albums with the band Gasoline, then he went solo and been a solo artist, having had different backing bands, but he was the singer, and in Gasoline there were 4 equals.
Yeah. There's a band in Canada called the Tragically Hip. The lead singer, Gord Downey, they never made it outside of Canada. They were huge in Canada, right up until the very end. And he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and they played their last tour across Canada, culminating with a final show in Kingston, where he's from, and the band formed. It was broadcast. I think they estimated 6 million people watched it simultaneously across the country. So they had screens out in village squares and town centers, and people watched it, and it was entirely a Canadian phenomenon. Yeah. Nobody else in the world really understood, but in Canada, he's like a saint. Yeah.
Same with Gasoline. Yeah. It could only be understood in Danish.
So which album would I pick up?
Oh, that's difficult. You should pick up Gas 5. There are some of the songs in English, actually. This Is My Life. Er den ikke på 5'eren, og Kvinde Min, the most famous song. Try with Gas 5.
Okay, well, we're going to, hopefully, I've got a couple of days off. I'm going to go find a vinyl store, because I'm back into vinyl, just like everybody else. And I can't buy much because I'm right at the start of a tour. But I would like to find one of those albums. So Gasoline 5?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'll get.
That or his very last album, his most recent one, is great. It was recorded in the rehearsal space by the bass player, because I think the bass player is fairly new in that band, and I think he probably said, "Let me produce it." So it's like garage rock recording. It's really cool. His very last album. I don't know what it's called, but it's the last one. Okay, it's great.
Yeah. I never heard it, but I will.
Yeah, it's really.
I would never have done that if he hadn't died.
I really recommend it. It's a great rock album. Yeah.
Is it on vinyl?
I bet.
Probably. You got some listening to do in between shows. When are you playing next time?
Tomorrow night. Yeah.
Okay.
At Alice in Copenhagen.
Wow.
Alice, like Alice Cooper, Alice?
More like Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
No, it's like Alice Coltrane, because it's true. It used to be a Copenhagen jazz house in the center of town. Then they moved to the area of Nørrebro, and then they gave it the name of the last act they had in the old Copenhagen jazz house, which were Alice Coltrane. So now they can't impress you by telling the story. Now I told.
Okay. Well, should be. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, because we got the first gig out under our belts now. So yeah.
No more nerves.
No more nerves.
No.